Hey there, welcome back. Today we are talking about knowing what Americans believe. So in our last video, we talked about what Americans believe. In this lesson, we're talking about how we actually know what Americans believe. In this lesson, we're covering topics 4.5, measuring public opinion data, and 4.6, evaluating public opinion data. In this lesson, we're going to learn the elements of a scientific poll, the value of polling, and the mistakes that can be made in polling. So let's get started. So the idea behind polling is that you take a small sample of the population and you extrapolate that out so that you can try to predict what the entire population will do. Public opinion, though, is the collection of popular views about something. Typically, we discuss public opinion about various political topics. And so a poll is really a survey of public opinion. So there's lots of different types of polls. The first is opinion polls, and these are an assessment of public opinion obtained by questioning a representative sample. And we're going to talk more about what a representative sample is here in a minute. Straw polls are more informal. They informally collect opinions of a non-random group. So again, we'll talk about what we mean by group and representative sample and things like that. But just know that straw polls are very informal polls. Benchmark polls are generally the first poll taken in a political campaign. This is used to determine how well a candidate may or may not do in an election. These are often used alongside with tracking polls. And a tracking poll is a poll that is repeated periodically with the same group of people to track and measure changes of opinion or knowledge. So typically a candidate will have a benchmark poll that they do at the beginning of their campaign, and then they continue to follow that same group of people that they surveyed to see how they are actually doing within their campaign. Entrance polls have to do with people actually going into voting booths and getting asked who they're going to vote for. So an entrance poll asks people who are about to walk in and vote who they plan on voting for. And exit polls are the exact opposite. They ask people coming out of the voting booth, hey, who did you just vote for? Then there are push polls. Push polls are a little bit different. Push polls are politically biased campaign information that are presented as a poll in order to change minds. Push polls are not meant to gather information. Push polls are meant to push information out. Let's talk about sampling techniques. Now remember, polls require having samples. The closer to the overall population you can get your sample, the more likely your poll is going to actually predict what the population will do. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is random sampling. And random sampling is just a limited number of people from the overall population. There's not any thought taken to who is a part of it. It's just a random group of people. Representative sampling, though, is a group whose demographic distribution is similar to that of the overall population. Now, hear this. Sampling can never be truly, completely representative of the overall population. You just can't do it. But you can get pretty close. But there are errors. So the errors that come in representative sampling are called oversampling or undersampling. Oversampling is a portion of that group within the sample that is larger than the population, and undersampling is a portion of a group within the sample that is smaller than the population. So for example, say you had a sample group that was all men. In that group, if you're trying to extrapolate out to the entire United States, you would have oversampled men and undersampled women. Convenience sampling, though, are where subjects of the poll are selected because of their convenient accessibility and proximity to the pollster. This can sometimes be where pollsters just make phone calls and try to call people and try to get people to answer some questions. Or it can be a pollster sitting at a shopping mall and asking people, hey, you mind answering a few questions for me? Those are considered convenience sampling. They are never going to be very representative because overall, you're not going to find truly representative groups in any one particular place. There are lots of ways that you can end up with errors in your poll outside of sampling, but that is part of it. The first way that you can end up with errors in your polling is through question wording. This is the way in which survey questions are phrased, which influences how respondents answer them. So if you look at the example given on the slide, it says, should concerned dog owners get their pets vaccinated? Most dog owners are going to say, yeah, I'm a concerned dog owner. Of course, we should get our pets vaccinated. That's probably going to give you a little bit different outcome in your poll than if you had asked, should owners be required to get their pets vaccinated? Those two questions, even though they're only very slightly different, are likely to give you different results because of the way in which they led the respondent. That leads to the next type of error, which is leading questions. These are questions in a poll that lead people to taking the poll to select a specific answer. In the first example, should concerned dog owners get their pets vaccinated? Well, nobody wants to be seen as a non-concerned dog owner. We all want to seem like we are concerned about our pets. That would likely give you an error in your poll. Sample error we talked about on the last slide with either oversampling or undersampling. But sample error is the difference between the results of random samples taken at the same time. So if you've got a random sample over here and a random sample over there, the difference between them is going to be your sample error. The last thing that we're going to look at is the margin of error. The margin of error is the number that states how far the poll results may be from the actual preferences of the total population of citizens. Typically, it's going to look like something that says, plus or minus 4, or plus or minus 5, or plus or minus 3. The smaller the number in a margin of error, the better your poll is. For example, on the slide here, you can see that you've got some instances where the candidates overlap, where the red candidate and the blue candidate overlap. If the margin of error is large enough on those polls, that poll could actually be saying that it goes the other way. So margin of error is very, very important, especially when you're dealing with polls that have very close outcomes. So if there's all of these ways that polling can be wrong, why do we use polling? Well, because polling is important, even if it seems like they get everything wrong sometimes. Polls are used throughout politics, but they're especially used during elections and debates. During the 2016 and 2020 elections, though, it seemed as though all of the polls got their information completely wrong. In 2016, it was so wrong that everyone thought Hillary Clinton would win, when in reality, Donald Trump won. In 2020, the results were much closer than any of the polls expected. So what happened? There are several theories, but the reality is that polling is inherently flawed in a couple of ways, and the 2016 and 2020 elections highlighted those flaws. The first flaw is that you have to have a representative sample. Except we've already talked about how there's no way to get a truly representative sample of the country. The second theory is specific in relation to Donald Trump, and it tries to take into account a shy Trump voter. These are people who were supposedly too afraid to say they were voting for Trump for whatever reasons and hid their true intent from pollsters. This theory hasn't actually been proven, and I don't think it can be proven. But here's the reality. The reality is more likely that people who voted for Donald Trump were less likely to participate in polls in the first place, thus making it even harder for pollsters to come up with a representative sample meaning going back to your first flaw, is that it's very hard to get a representative sample, especially if you have a group of people who is less likely to talk to pollsters in the first place. One of the things that is really important is that politicians actually focus on policy issues based on polling. So when national polls come out and it shows that 95% of the population thinks that we need to focus on environmental issues, politicians are likely to sit up and notice that because they want to get reelected. And so they're going to start to actually talk about and bring legislation forth that is about environmental policy. So polling is very important in communicating the will of the people to politicians. In this lesson, you should have learned the elements of a scientific poll, the value of polling, and the mistakes made in polling. If there's anything you missed in this lesson, please go through now and re-watch that part of the video. Then make sure you answer the summarizing question on your notes. That way you can get a stamp the next time we're in class. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Bye.